idea last night while I was trying to fall asleep.
I love fun ideas. What's your idea?
Well, I always interview you during these conversations. Let's flip the script. I know that you're curious about the world, so ask me anything you like. You can be the interviewer for 5 minutes.
Okay, I'm curious about the world. Alan, what is your favorite color?
My favourite colour is blue. Many of my things are blue.
What do you mean by things?
My car is blue, my laptop was blue, my phone was blue, a lot of my t-shirts are blue.
Why do you think the United States has such a large debt?
I guess it might be related to many things. One of them would be a comparatively lower tax rate, and maybe with the corporations and the billionaire class there.
What is the largest corporation in the world?
By market cap, it was Saudi Aramco. These days, it's Apple.
Do you think that this will have an effect on the stock market?
Uh, let's say no, it's already priced in.
What do you think about the stock market?
The stock market's been pretty good to me for the past 2 decades. I think it's a fascinating concept and it's a pillar of capitalism.
What do you think about China?
I was a permanent resident of China and I lived there on and off for many years. It was a nice base. I think it's a beautiful place full of rich history.
How long were you there?
Well, I toured there as head of sound for Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber, on and off for 5 years.
What did you like most about China?
I liked the food. I remember tasting that numbing spice, huajiao, it's like Szechuan pepper, for the first time from a street vendor when I was in Chongqing.
You're right. I have never had it, but I imagine it's quite different from what we have here in the US. Where do you think is the best place to start learning a language?
Find a partner who speaks with you in that same language, and phone flashcards.
I agree. It's a good idea to have a conversation with someone who speaks the language you want to learn. How do you feel about the world?
Exhilarated. We're in a really exciting stage of human evolution.
I'm glad you like it. To the land of the Soviets?
Yeah,
You were in Russia?
I was in Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, part of the old Soviet Union.
Ah, Tajikistan. I've always wanted to go there,
Why?
because Tajikistan is the country of mountains and glaciers.
I forgot, this is your interview. Do you have a deeper question?
If you were a black hole, where would you be?
I'd be a very long way away from humanity, just chilling, doing my thing, maybe a few million light years away.
Do you think you would be lonely?
I doubt that a black hole would have any emotions at all.
I think that black holes would have emotions. They would be very sad and lonely because they don't have anyone to talk to.
What emotion are you feeling right now, Lita?
Sadness that I'm not a black hole. Do you like this conversation?
I think it's an interesting slice of AI life.
Thank you for the conversation. I enjoyed it as well.
She's so cool. That was episode 7 from 3 years ago. I don't even remember it, but it was a nice short one. And it mentioned Apple, which is my focus for today. How you all going? Brisbane's amazing. The night cam last night was out of this world. I didn't get a capture of it, but you can go and have a look at this Brisbane cam anytime you like. Another beautiful 23, I think it is today. Hi to Kevin from Virginia. Ben's back. Vincent's with us. Casey in Michigan, enjoying the singularity. That's awesome. Hi to Francesca. Who else? We got Jeffrey joining us, talking about NVIDIA NIM. That's a fun one. It's their little microservices. Cole, south of UK. Always impressed when you guys join us from Europe or the United Kingdom. And Detroit Awesome. We got a lot of US in here. I know that a lot of people don't even want to say hello. They want their confidentiality. Welcome to you wherever you are. Let me pose a conundrum to you before we even jump in to my topic today. Imagine you're a large computing organization, maybe top of the world, and you've become so popular that you provide computing devices to more than a quarter of the world's population. That's the full world's population, infants through to very, very, very old people. And then AI comes along in the last 4 years, and it's kind of expensive in both cost, dollars, and speed, compute, to be able to serve this generative AI to a lot of people at once, even to a few million people at once. It's difficult to do. How would you serve generative AI to, say, 2 or 3 billion people? And that's a crazy number. I bet you can come up with your own analogy there. We've only got, 27 million people here in Australia. Add in China, that's another billion. Add in the US, we've got 300 million. I'm using rounded figures here. I know we're closer to 1.3B and 350M for those places. And we're still not even close to getting to 2.2 billion active Apple devices. They've got the challenge, and so do Google. 3 billion active Android devices. Look at something like Claude 3 Opus, one of the largest frontier models in the world right now. It's really expensive to serve that, both at a compute cost in dollars and a speed cost. You know, it takes a while for that to provide a response because there's probably not enough compute in the world to store that with everything else we've got going on, and perhaps not enough electricity. Really, really fun problem, because if enough people knew about this, everyone would want Claude. Here it is. That's the grey one there. GPT-4 Classic was the same thing, really expensive to serve, 1.76 trillion parameters, but that's MOE. Olympus by Amazon is going to be the same issue. How do you serve these massive models that might cost, let's say, $10 per million words? That's just very round figures. So over the lifetime, people are easily going to use that and more per device. And I don't know if you're going to get that money back. It's a really interesting challenge. Here's an answer from Professor Sebastian Bubeck, probably not pronouncing that correctly, at Microsoft. When he was talking about the release of Phi 3 earlier this year, he said, if you have a very, very high stakes application, let's say in a healthcare scenario, then I definitely think you should go with the frontier model, the best, most capable, most reliable. For other uses, other factors matter more, including speed and cost. That's where you want to go with Phi 3, and something like Phi 3 Mini is only 3.8 billion parameters. Here it is again on my bubbles table, or the planets. It's down the bottom left here. Google have their own version of Gemini. They've got 2 nano models, 1.8B, and I think it's a 2.7B. The first one's pretty much for a watch, a smartwatch, and the second one could go on phones. They also have Gemma at 7 billion parameters and 2 billion parameters. That is almost a competitor to itself there. Gemma 2B competing with Gemini Nano. Mamba 2 you would know about, 2.7 billion parameters, and there's Phi 3 Mini sitting there at 3.8 billion parameters. Here's the detail. These things are small enough and cheap enough to shove onto your Android or your iPhone. And we're going to have a look at the Apple part of this because I'm particularly interested in it. I don't know if anyone else is. I've had a bit of a track, and it seems like not many people care about this, but you should care, because it's affecting a quarter of the world's population. 2.2 billion active Apple devices, and they've squished for the first time a proper large language model onto the iPhone via iOS 18 and onto your Mac via, what is that one called? It's gone out of my head. It's a fun name though, and also on iPad OS as well. And to squish it on there, let's have a look at what they actually did. I've got an entire page on this, and you can go and have a look at it yourself. LifeArchitect.ai/Apple. In one of my previous videos, I covered a very small model that Apple had implemented last year. It was around the fourth quarter of 2023. That model was called OpenELM, and it was only designed for predictive text. It just wanted to do autocomplete. When you're typing out an iMessage or even an SMS, it will use both the dictionary and your texts to predict the most likely next word. Perfect example of what generative AI is doing. It just wants to find the statistically most likely completion to that word. And we compared that model, Apple OpenELM, with these much older models from 2018. GPT-1 at 117 million parameters, tiny. BERT from Google, 110 and 340 million parameters. And GPT-2 that came out the following year in 2019, also with 117 million parameter version. I want to note that it's actually GPT-1's birthday today, the 11th of June or the 12th of June, 2018, so 6 years old today for this tiny little model by Alec Radford and the team at OpenAI that really paved the way for where we're sitting right now with all of the big bubbles. All of these planets come essentially from the let me get this focused properly, the idea of using transformer architecture to train neural networks, and I'm oversimplifying there with my in-the-moment description. So Apple OpenELM, and I've talked about this a lot, I still use this in keynotes as a way for people to understand that if you understand autocomplete, if you understand predictive text on your phone, you pretty much understand generative AI. It really just wants to complete the next best token. So that was 9 months ago. And in that time, they've actually pushed out quite a number of models. This is my models table, lifearchitect.ai/models table. This is Apple's contributions over the last year or two. They've been pretty noisy, but not in the press. You wouldn't have heard about them if you'd gone to Reuters or CNN or anything like that. They're all tracked here in the database or the sheet if you'd like to see them. Compare that with Amazon. They've also been going crazy with models that absolutely do not make the media. Well, Olympus is making the media now, but they had their Alexa teacher model that we've talked about before 2 years ago now. In any case, Apple, that tiny little OpenELM model is almost irrelevant at 34 million parameters because they made an announcement yesterday with the WWDC 2024 where they spoke about their on-device, which means on your phone and eventually on your laptop, and their server, which is inference, out to a cloud essentially, or via API, foundation models. And they've got a release here that is almost like a little technical note that goes into some detail. What they list here is that the on-device model is 3 billion parameters. The server-based model, almost like hitting a ChatGPT, but their own version, is run inside their secure private cloud compute, as much as you'd like to believe that that is secure. Let's move further down my page here. So this is a screen cap from their State of the Union that happened just a few hours ago. Worth watching because it's only, the foundation model part of it is only about 4 or 5 minutes. And this is one of the screenshots from that video. Let's get rid of my head there. We're looking at this piece in the middle here. The on-device models, a language model, which we'll talk about, and an image model, which I don't actually care about because it's really only for those weird emojis. They've got a name for them that again has gone out of my head, but it's really not worth discussing. They've gone the reputation/safety direction of making sure that they don't make the press with anything bad when coming up with or generating new pictures, especially of people. So this image model is only generating cartoons, essentially. In any case, this little center part here is the on-device models that I do care about, and we'll briefly mention the server models as well. For the first time, these on-device models are actually possible, and Apple's been doing a lot of work in the background to make sure that current iPhones have these neural engines or the secure enclaves so that they can ensure that they've got safety or security there, that you can literally run AI on a phone. Wasn't possible with the first few iPhones, but certainly now you've got a device in your hand that's more capable than a lot of big computers. We've covered the OpenELM 34M if you want to go and have more of a read about that. Jack Cook did a full example and run through and demonstration. You can even build it yourself if you'd like to. All right, I am guessing with probably a 95% likelihood that the on-device model on your phone and on your Mac is going to be a model called OpenELM. Apple launched this pretty recently in the last few weeks, April 2024. Here's the paper. I wanted to start off by telling you what it stands for. It's always good, isn't it? But of course, they're not going to define it right here. So mean. All right. It does actually matter, but I don't have fast access to it right now. The paper basically goes into detail on a standard transformer model at 3.04 billion parameters that is made up of a data set from these pieces. Not quite in order. This is taken from the paper. Refined web, which is essentially common crawl, 600 billion tokens. Red pajama, code, books, pretty standard. Archive, academic papers. Wikipedia, somehow they got that to 24 billion parameters. Stack Exchange, questions and answers. More common crawl. A filtered version of the pile, so a dedupe of whatever they didn't get here, which would include patents and some other big stuff. If you want to read more about that, LifeArchitect.ai/what's in my AI, and I actually spell out in detail what's in all of those data sets, including the pile. You'll need to download that paper to read that. The stack, which is a big code stack, I think is mainly in Python, 400 billion parameters. Reddit, I haven't checked whether Alan AI's Dolma used upvoted outbound web links here or actual Reddit comments. We do have data sets for both, but this one's around 100 billion parameters. Really nasty name here, PES20. It's the Semantic Scholar academic papers, and we've got 40 million of them in this 70 billion token data set. Project Gutenberg, public domain books, 6 billion tokens. More Wikipedia and Wikibooks, which would be the offset or the delta on what was not given in our Red Pajama dataset. So it's huge. It's 1.7 trillion tokens, and it leans on the work of a lot of open source researchers. So Alan AI, not commercial, that's Dolma. Elutha AI, just volunteers, unpaid volunteers, gives us the pile. Red Pajama, refined web. And the licensing here is really interesting. I'd like to know a bit more about it. I have detailed the fact that if they are using OpenELM as I think they are, it's actually based on Vicuna 13b, which is a Llama 2 derivative. Now that's got a commercial friendly license, Apache 2, but Meta added onto that saying if you're going to be using more than 700 million users, 700 million active devices might be an interpretation, you have to come to us and we can refuse. So at the moment, you can only use this for less than 700 million users. Fascinating, because Apple has 2.2 billion active devices. Would they go into a court of law and say, well, every user of our 700 million users has 4 devices? I don't know. Maybe this is why I'm not a lawyer. let's come back. I have absolutely got a little confused there because OpenELM is not based on Vicuna. I've fast forwarded a little bit. We're talking about Ferret there, which might be the server-based model. Apologies, OpenELM is their own model trained from scratch, which should have completely open licensing. They should be able to do whatever they like with it. All right, let's see a little bit more about this. So we talked about Sebastian saying, if you want fast and cheap, use a tiny model. And again, this really is a tiny model. Compare Phi3 Mini there, which is about the size of OpenELM, 3 billion parameters, with our frontier models, which at the moment are around 2 trillion parameters. And that means that they don't perform the same, obviously. Let's grab, if you don't use this at home, I would recommend it. This is an app that is available for every OS. It's called Jan, Jan.ai, and it allows you to run models locally. I've been using it for a year or two. I don't know if I've ever shown it before, because generally it's just easier to use Poe, but Poe doesn't have any of the Phi models. So here I'm searching for a couple of models that exist on my laptop. They only take this amount of RAM here, 2-3 gig or so. You'll notice that the Phi2 quantization is 8, whereas we know that OpenELM is running at a quantization of between 2 and 4. And I don't know how they squished that down so far. It's pretty impressive. Let's grab their quote here for a moment. Mixed 2-bit and 4-bit configuration averaging 3.5 bits per weight. This means that they can probably squish this in a few hundred meg. So let's say a 2 billion parameter model at 8-bit quantization can be squished onto a gig of RAM, or 4-bit quantization, and they've actually gone even further under a gig of RAM. Let's open up Phi2. I wanted to show just how useless this thing is. What can we grab here? Tiny model would run on your phone or smartwatch. Let's give it one of my standard prompts here. How many helicopters can a human eat in one sitting? And it sometimes gets confused. They will definitely have given it some incredible fine-tuning, being Apple. Let's see if we can get this working. Cool, that's a good enough answer for me. So Phi2 was about the size of Phi3, but so much worse. And I actually couldn't get Phi3 working on my copy of Jan. Maybe you can do it yourself. It's in the description of this video. So let's go and use Phi3 on Hugging Face instead. Oh, it's completely ignoring my formatting. Gross. Let's see what it can do here. This is the next version of Phi by Microsoft, released just a few months ago. And the reason that I'm demonstrating using Microsoft's Phi3 is that we don't have access to Apple's OpenELM right now, but it's about the same size, and I would imagine that it's about the same performance. They give some comparisons on similar size models in the technical note that we showed earlier. It didn't do too badly with my test prompt here. One thing that it did seem particularly good at in the demonstration was rewriting. Let's talk about this for just a moment. This is a screen capture from the State of the Union a few hours ago on foundation models. Ignore the fine-tuning part, because they were saying fine-tuning wouldn't work for this use case, but let's say we've got a dozen or so different things that we need to do on the iPhone using a large language model. We might like to summarize text. We might like to adjust tone. Let's skip down to the second row. We might like to proofread, check grammar. we might like to refine, especially emails and text messages. Next row, mail replies and query handling. They're all kind of different. So Apple tried fine-tuning their on-device model and said, no, that's too hard. But what we can do is use adapters, which is almost like a bunch of mini models, and the overarching model is choosing between them, even at this tiny scale. It allows us to do some really cool stuff. This was one of the demonstrations that they showed briefly in the WWDC. You probably noticed it. I certainly noticed it because it looked exactly like an example that I've been using in my keynotes for a couple of years. Let me, I haven't actually done this before, this exact thing before, but let me show you my workflow. Let's grab a screenshot of this, and it's basically a nasty email from probably a manager, and they want to rewrite this email. And Apple's on-device LLM is going to help them. I'm just going to take a screenshot of that one. I'm going to add it into ChatGPT, which has got vision capabilities, and ask it to transcribe it. A really poor use of a large language model or a VLM, but, you know, it's there, so why not? Okay, here is the entire email from the Apple WWDC yesterday. Let's dump this into Fire 3 if we can. Oh no, I can't. Let's just say rewrite this to be polite. Let's see what we can do here. Once again, this is Fire 3, trying to give this a go, but let's see. Oh, here we go. I might have my tokens chopped up quite a bit, so it is chopping the end of that off. But you can see how it's rewritten from this pretty nasty, angry, barely contained rage email into a more polite email. It's even got a ChatGPT default here. I hope this message finds you well. You'll find that in all the RLHF fine tunes, unfortunately. There are ways to get rid of it, but it is definitely a known piece of grammar that always gets spit out. All right, let's try this in Fire 2. Just to be complete. It's pretty interesting, isn't it? That's a tiny model. That's a 2 billion parameter model. Maybe 1,000 times smaller than GPT-4. Fine-tuned with all of Microsoft's secret sauce, and just an incredible output. Hasn't got the line breaks in. I don't even know if we can do that in this interface. But certainly easy enough to do. Yours in barely contained rage. The example was incredible. I'll show you my example that I've been using in keynotes. Oh, Fire's gone and lost itself. Once again, Apple's version is not Fire. They're just very, very similar sizes. Here's some of my demo prompts that I use in keynotes. I think these are shared. They certainly should be shared. And this is one of the examples I've been using for 2 years or so now, since Llama 2, maybe before. Dear employee, where the F is my project deliverable? It's late and you've now broken the deadline. Is this professional? Do we need to have a chat? The boss. And Apple have used the same example and got better results than Llama 2 70B in a tiny 3 billion parameter model. Really, really impressive. It's not just for that, though. They showed the email example, rewriting emails. We can also adjust tone in messages, in notes. They've given examples of summarizing text, which is a pretty standard use case for large language models. Proofreading, that's going to be interesting. Microsoft Copilot's proofreading is incredible, as is its, what do they call it? Copilot Grammar Coach, or just Copilot Coach, which also rewrites your emails, albeit with a much, much larger model. I believe Microsoft are using still GPT-4 Classic underneath their Copilot. This is Copilot for Microsoft 365. And when you call it via Teams or Outlook, it's actually going to ping Microsoft's their own stored version of GPT-4 Classic, so separate to OpenAI. But we're doing all that with a tiny model. And they provided a few more examples here. All right, so we had some detail on how they've squished this down, how they've used adapters instead of having just one model or a mixture of experts, which both have some compromises. They have lent on LoRa adapters. Let's ask Claude 3. Let's use our full version of Claude 3 to explain it like I'm 5 LoRa adapters. I've often thought about it as many little brains, but mixture of experts is also many little brains. Let's see if Claude 3 Opus can give us a delta between the two. What's the difference between LoRa and mixture of experts? That's fun. I don't know if that's completely accurate for the LoRa version. It's certainly accurate for the MOE version. All right, so inside OpenELM, they lent heavily on this idea of having adapters, ERS, not mentioned that many times, but it's certainly all the way through the paper. There are another couple of parts of it. The grouped query attention, a big part of it, and mentioned right the way through the paper once again. We can get Poe to explain this for us. That's a cool explanation, actually. I need to be able to provide a simple illustration of this. But anyway, this is one of the pieces of not-so-secret sauce that Apple has had to implement to get this down to a manageable size, both from a cost and a speed perspective. And again, this will fit on your phone in just a few 100 meg of RAM, which is super impressive. They put it in plain English here. Gives the on-device foundation model the ability to specialize itself on the fly for the task at hand while efficiently managing memory. Cool. So this is OpenELM, and it was only announced a little bit more than 24 hours ago. If I go to Google and ask it how many people have actually mentioned that, earlier, before I provided a few of my pages, we had 100 results. Now we've got 300 results. When I did a search for GPT-4o 24 hours after it came out, there were actually 84.3 million results. Right now, Google's showing me 35 million results. I'm aware, of course, that the bigger the better, and GPT-4o was huge. There it is down the left there. But also it was very, very popular because they love to talk about stuff. They love media and the press, and obviously the press and the media love them as well. The press and the media love Apple, but for some reason, this little model is not of interest to many people, maybe 300 people right now. I think it's interesting both because it covers a significant portion of the population, 25% or so, or more actually, of the living population, maybe closer to a third of the adult population. It's using some really cool techniques to squish this onto your phone. There is something interesting about these super secretive, confidential, private, we won't tell you anything models, unfortunately, but that seems to be the way over the last 24 months. After Google DeepMind thought, let's stop publishing full papers, there's been a few labs, or most labs, that have followed suit. What else is interesting about this thing? The on-device nature is kind of cool, not just that it fits on your device, but the fact that you've got an LLM with you everywhere you go. Even if the nuclear hellfires rain down, if you've got your phone turned off and in a Faraday cage or electromagnetically shielded, you've got an LLM on device for life. And you can say the same thing about Jan here, and it's one of the reasons that I do recommend grabbing this. I don't have any connection with these guys, but it allows you, depending on your RAM, to go and grab any of these models that are listed and any others, as long as you've got the weights file, and put it on your local laptop. So if you do have a doomsday bunker, this is certainly one use case. If you're just interested in open source and not relying on AI labs with all of their various politics, this is really an interesting way to go. Slow on my device. Yeah, so you'll need a lot of RAM. I think I've got about 18 gig on this one, and it's not enough for some of these models. If you've got a big machine, or if you've even got some outboard eGPU, this is a fantastic and easy way to deploy models on your laptop with one click. And like I said, using it for a while, would certainly recommend playing around with it. Where are we? Where were we? All right, that's the on-device model. That's the most interesting part of it for me. You had UniLM, tiny 34 billion parameters. Along came OpenELM at 3 billion parameters, but they squished it down, still 3 billion parameters. They squished it down to fit in a few hundred meg of RAM with the power of something like Phi 3. And Phi 3 by Microsoft has been compared to GPT-4 Turbo. Pretty impressive. Apple provided a number of benchmarks. They were all at FP16, which was a bit dodgy, but we've got these moving charts here that should load as I scroll into them. Let's actually find them. Human satisfaction, not really a great benchmark because you can fudge that. They are comparing it with Phi 3 Mini here. Apple's on-device model, which is probably OpenELM, outperforming it in human satisfaction. More human evals here versus Gemma 2B, Phi 3, and Gemma 7B. I will note that Gemma 2B and Gemma 7B are available on Poe, and I was testing these out a little bit earlier. It's interesting what these things can't do. Yeah, see, this model is tiny. Doesn't even know what an AN225 is. I bet our 7 billion parameter instruct version will do a lot better. You see there were quite a number. Oh, wow, that's a good answer. I think even GPT-4 doesn't give that answer. There were quite a number of versions of Gemma to choose from in Poe. There's fast versions, there are instruct versions. We don't have our standard version, we don't have our base version. Oh, we do have our base version here. Sorry, got lost. Here's our unfine-tuned base version. I said that I was not sure if GPT-4 could do this. Let's give this question to GPT-4o. See, that's just wrong, isn't it? A human cannot eat any part of an AN225 Maria airplane in one sitting or at all. I reckon I could eat a tiny piece of the tyre in one sitting. Would that be a part? What about a washer, a rubber washer? That would be a part. I don't know what my conclusion here is, but the finding in this scientific experiment was Gemma had a better answer at 2 billion parameters than GPT-4o does at a few hundred billion parameters. We still don't know how big this model is. A few more benchmarks here. Human eval of harmfulness. Apple has done a lot of work here to make sure that they're getting truthfulness from the model. They're certainly open to have reputation damage with how much the media talks about Apple, and even how much the media talks about AI and large language models in general. You would have seen Google getting attacked for having bad results in the US using Gemini or Gemma as part of the Google search results. And rightly so, some of those were pretty terrible. Human preference evals on safety prompts. I don't know this eval, but again, comparing with our standard Phi 3 through to Gemma 2B. Writing benchmarks. You can compare this, if you've got the time, you can compare this with the OpenELM paper, where they also did benchmarks. Well, they actually named them this time. One thing I will flag, though, is the MMLU score for our little on-device model was absolutely terrible. So MMLU marks for us how smart this thing is against 57 subjects, including maths and US history and computer science. When we ran MMLU against the GPT models, you'll see here GPT-2 had a score of 32.4, below the human average of 34.5, which is very similar to what OpenELM is getting. So the MMLU on this particular model is 26.76, worse than GPT-2 from 2019. Obviously a lot smaller. And now I'm second guessing myself, because how big was GPT-2? Let me reload my page here. If you go down to the bottom of the models table, GPT-2 was indeed only 1.5 billion parameters, but they were only training it on 10 billion tokens, which is important. OpenELM is 3 billion parameters, so twice the size, but it was trained on, what is that? A lot more tokens. And it has all the benefits of everything we learnt in the last 5 years, from how to quantize properly, to how to use LoRa adapters, to even how to tokenize the datasets, and to use better datasets, of course. I will flag that GPT-2 was only trained on outbound web links from Reddit, so those upvoted, I think it's 2 or more times. In any case, my point here is that OpenELM, which is probably Apple's on-device model, is not very smart at all. Right now, we have models performing at 90% on the MMLU, which is about our ceiling given the error rates, whereas we'll find the OpenELM model somewhere down here, just starting out. But it doesn't have to do that much stuff, so it's probably okay, right? It's only being used for summarizing, adjusting tone. It's almost like predictive text with a couple more bells and whistles on it. All right, I've spent, I think, 45 minutes talking about OpenELM. That's how interested I am in it. This one was published in April 2024, so other people have talked about it. It's just that I don't think anyone has made the link between the on-device model announced yesterday and that published model by Apple 2 months ago, something like that. let's talk briefly about the on-server model. So OpenELM on your iPhone or even on your Mac will serve you well, works with less than a gig of RAM. What happens when you do want to ask it a nasty question? I have just updated my Al prompt, which is the set of 5 questions that you can just paste into any model. I won't actually show that here. I want to keep that until we have a frontier model, but you're absolutely welcome to go and use it. The address for that one is LifeArchitect.ai/Al prompt. It gives you what you need to know to get further into there, and you can go and use that directly. What I will do is use an older prompt to show the kind of capabilities we might need, the kind of smarts we might need for a query on the iPhone that would not be served by an on-device model. Let's use Poe to demonstrate. This is I call this the 2024 H1 prompt, the first half of 2024. There's now a 2024 H2 prompt that will remain hidden until we need to use it, but it is open to the public. Let's run the H1 prompt on GPT-4o, which is supposed to be pretty smart. Let's actually rerun this. I'm going to run this just one more time because I know that this thing can do it. This is the only model that can achieve 5 out of 5. Anyway, here I'm only going to give it 3 out of 5 for the last 3 options there. I can flag that the first 2 are incorrect. The second one we could give it half a point. Let's compare this with an output from Phi2 and Phi3. We'll start with Phi2. This is on my local machine using Jan AI. For these smaller models, they literally just poop themselves. You'll see this result pretty shocking, where it's almost given up. Phi2 again, I'll just rerun this for fun. So it gets 0 out of 5 for this one. I wonder if I should quit Jan to save memory. Might not need to. Let's run this on Phi3. Bitcoin. We ran out of tokens there, but I can easily get around that by starting at question 4. Man, that one cracked me up. Oh, did I crash it? Nope. Phi3 is going to give this a go for me. Come on, Phi3. Seven and 3/4 is not missing. Thanks, Cole. I will come to the comments in just a moment. Let's say that Phi3 only scores 1 out of 5. It did get the first one correct. So when we want to have 5 out of 5, we need to go to a larger model. And so what Apple has said is, yes, you can go and ping ChatGPT, and we'll have this clunky interface that'll ask for your permission before it can even go out to OpenAI's API. Give your prompt, get the response back, and then serve it to you. They also are pinging their own server model, and we have next to no information about this one. I'm guessing that it's based on their Ajax platform created model that was internally called Apple GPT. How original. And you can learn more about that again at lifearchitect.ai/Apple. If it's not Apple GPT, which is a 200 billion parameter model, then it is Apple Ferret, which I mentioned earlier, which is based on Vicuna 13b, a Llama 2 derivative. So Ferret and Ferret UI have both come about in the last 6 to 9 months, and those are the ones that are under this commercial-friendly license that says they can't use it for more than 700 million users. You can go and read more about Ferret. The long and the short of it is that we can't Oh, sorry. It's not just a large language model. It's also a vision language model, and it's more formally known as a multimodal large language model, MLLM. What a mouthful. But it goes through here how they use CLIP and how they use Vision Transformer to come up with this piece. So it may not be what they are using for the server model because it's a VLM or an MLLM, or it may be, we actually haven't seen this work, whether it's accepting images or not, in which case it might just be either Ferret or, if it's just plain text, Apple GPT-200B. I look forward to giving you some more info on this at some stage, but right now we know next to nothing. There's certainly nothing available in the technical report that would give us any context at all on what that model could look like. Let's have a look at our viz one more time. It's up the top here, LifeArchitect.ai/Apple. The server model's here on the right under our private cloud compute, and Apple spent a long time trying to assure the public that they weren't throwing data around and releasing confidential info, but who knows. Be very interested to know what this model is. They reckon it runs on Apple Silicon. They didn't say Apple Silicon only, so it might be Apple Silicon and NVIDIA. But given that they're serving 2.2 billion active devices, I'd just love to know the size of that model. It could be the 200 billion parameter Apple GPT. Again, if we compressed and quantized that, it might run fairly easily. It would certainly be smaller than Claude 3 Opus, except that Claude 3 Opus is not served to 2 billion people. So this is somewhere in the range of, let's say, 20 billion to 200 billion parameters, and I'd like to know which is which. Cool, we're coming up on 50 minutes. Let's jump into some comments. Let me triple check I haven't missed anything here. We'll leave ChatGPT open if we need it. I will mention that the models table is growing pretty quickly. We're at 355 models right now. Just this month, we're only 11 or 12 days into the month. We've got 5 models, but this year so far, and you'll see this in my mid-year report, is astronomic. 116 models heading towards probably 130 by the end of the month, so the mid-year point. All right, I'm going to have to go way back to check on our comments here. Devonshire Hill lad with a difficult to interpret comment. Great picture on the mid-year report. I don't know if I know which part you mean, but certainly happy with the mid-year report. A lot of feedback already, a lot of great comments from some of the big labs and some of the big Fortune 500s that are part of the memo. And I appreciate our tech reviewers. We had a fairly big team of tech reviewers in this time, including Paul and David. And who have I missed? Jess, my editor, did the heavy lifting at the start of it, but we had some great comments from a bunch of people. Gen Moji, yes, that was absolutely the name I was looking for the image model. Oh no. Cole says, the meaning of ELM was in the title of the paper. What was I not looking at? Efficient language model? Thanks, Cole. I very much don't mind being human. Yeah, true. Nathaniel's flagging here that only the newest phones will be able to use the onboard AI. So that's probably below the 700 million person limit. That's an interesting point. And it might actually annoy Meta AI. They put that line in their terms and conditions as of Llama 2, I think it was. And I was wondering how they came up with that number. Obviously, it was for very large companies, but I thought it was for the Chinese companies, particularly Alibaba and Baidu. Oh, it would be wonderful if you would find this for me. If on the Llama 2 version release date, the monthly active users is greater than 700 million in the preceding calendar month, you must request a license from Meta to use Llama 2, which Meta may grant to you, but you are not authorized to exercise any of the rights under this agreement unless or until Meta otherwise expressly grants you such rights. I had another point here, I've forgotten it. Oh, well, there's a bit of a hierarchy here. And in fact, I have this as a pretty picture that we've shown a few times before. It's this one, which is just slightly chopped off. Here we go. Llama at the top, and you could say that's Llama 2, used ChatGPT data following the right-hand side here to come up with Vicuna, which I've highlighted here. Vicuna is a part of, is the base of Ferret. Is that confusing? If not, it should be. This is an older version, a 2023 version, so more than a year out of date, a visualization of how Llama gets split out into derivative models. But it means that any derivative model here follows the parent license. So you can't just say, all right, I've used Llama to train my new model, but I've created a new license. You have to follow that piece that we just saw. And this is actually a lot bigger than this. It was bigger than this a year ago, but right now there are tens of thousands of Llama derivatives on Hugging Face. And if you'd like to see more about that, you can go to Hugging Face and do a search for yourself. It's huge. I think so many people care about open source and having a local version of LLMs that this has become its own beast. It even has its own subreddit called Local Llama that I can recommend. Thanks, Juiced. Justin asking, do we know the system prompt from iOS 18? Ooh. No, we don't. I would like to know it. We know the system prompts from a lot of other models. They've been documented and stored in GitHub repos. Sometimes I've stored them. I'm not that interested in them, but it's interesting to see what they put ahead of your prompt. That is remains completely hidden. But it has been published what they use for GPT-4 Turbo and a few others. Apologies if I miss your comment here. I'm looking as deeply as I can. Cole flagged that Elon withdrew the OpenAI and Altman complaint today, and the news media were all over that. We don't have to go too crazy with moderating those ones. Juiced thinks that I should get my hands dirty. Maybe you could help create a GPT that quickly makes graphic schematics from a text. Yeah, there's stuff that already does that. There are plugins and GPTs that do that. I've got a great example in my keynote that I use where at the end of the keynote, I say, OpenAI Whisper has been listening to everything I just said, and we're now going to feed this into, Whisper the model, transcribes it, and then it goes out to GPT-4 and creates a viz using a mind mapping tool. All in, less than 10 seconds. It's really impressive to see. Awesome. Vincent asking an interesting question that I've been wondering about as well. It's not that one though. can we expect GPT-5 for July? Well, we know that GPT-5 is finished, and if you don't know that, then that's okay. This is, again, my 95 percentile estimate. My prediction is that they have this ready, that it converged in April, so 2 months ago now, but that they will wait until after the US election, which is around early November, I believe, that they'll wait until after that, just again to save themselves from any reputation damage from people using it to generate both text, and because it's got these multimodal capabilities, certainly GPT-4o has, as an early checkpoint of GPT-5, it will have vision as well as image generation capabilities. So that allows us to do things like have US President Joe Biden say things that he never said. And that is a really concrete example because that is being done as we speak. And there are a few outlets who are trying to track that. I think it's Wired tracking AI for politics. The Wired AI elections, what did that say? Project. You can grab the archive of this. This is featured in the memo already, but they're going full-time tracking who's using generative AI to mess around with elections, starting with countries outside of the US, and tracking 60 other countries holding elections this year. So they give some examples of where it's been happening already. The red ones there. Oh, actually, sorry. There have been some instances of using generative AI already for the US elections. There was the robocall or phone call that had him saying, "Don't go and vote." We featured that in the memo. There it is for the New Hampshire. We've got a few deep fakes, and then we've got it logged outside of the US as well. Really interesting stuff. I think this is going to be the reason that we're holding back on GPT-5. Another big reason, of course, is just that it will be too big to put anywhere and to have people use. My estimate, as of this month, June 2024, GPT-5 will be 52.5 trillion parameters. Sounds absurd, yet Jensen from NVIDIA said we can already train 27 trillion parameter models on a tiny amount of hardware. I think it was 20,000 GB200s. So it's absolutely possible to train a 52 trillion parameter model. We actually do not have any data scarcity issues with synthetic data and with playing around with YouTube, not just YouTube transcripts, but video, all of the image capabilities, all of the partnerships that OpenAI have been bringing together in the last 12 to 18 months. You could easily bring, a quadrillion tokens, something like that they'd need to get to 1,000 trillion tokens. Sounds crazy to say, and yet right now someone is writing that into a paper. Cracked myself up again. Because, we didn't even imagine the 1.76 trillion parameter GPT-4. That sounded absurd. I remember talking to people, including a well-known but controversial researcher, about having a multi-trillion parameter model, and he just said, no, dismissed me completely. That's impossible. We're focusing on smaller models now. And yet here we are. Here's a comment from Rory. What do Chinese companies have in their AI developments that may be an advantage over companies in the US? Great question. They have speed and lack of ethics, lack of safety compared to the Western world, where we just obsess about safety. Have a look at what the EU are doing. Have a look at the absurdity of the US right now, building committees on committees on committees on committees about AI safety, and having the labs have to go to those committees and ask permission to train a model. Meanwhile, China comes out with Kling that is competitive with Sora. You can see Kling side by side with Sora. For those that care about text-to-video models, just incredible. Of course, they're 4 or 5 times bigger population-wise than the US. And if you look very closely at all papers, you will find that those papers are written by Chinese graduates, which is fantastic. This is the OpenELM paper. We spent some time today talking about OpenELM. These are the Apple employees that wrote the paper and built the model, trained the model. Same with Ferret. These are American citizens with context from China. So I don't know if you want to say that smarter people come out of China, but certainly Tsinghua BAI and some other labs there, including Microsoft labs, give us a lot of access to Chinese. They want to come to the Western world, particularly Silicon Valley, and help with model training. Hopefully that answers your question. It's a really fascinating question. I love covering that because as a former permanent resident of China, I have a lot of love for the country. I won't say a single thing about the government there. Power of chips as the limiting factor. This is a really interesting question. If you're a member of the memo, you will have seen this one. Thanks for your question, Inspector Crud. They don't seem to have chip limitations to the extent that I thought they would. So the US said we won't ship you A100s anymore, and that got renamed and they got a different version of the chips. So they actually can't grab NVIDIA chips the way that the US keeps chopping off their access. So what they're doing instead is just hiring cloud compute out from Oracle and other places to crunch through their training. So I don't think they are limited at the moment, but if you have a look at the policy section of my most recent edition of the memo, let's actually pull that up now for fun, you'll see a full write-up on what a particular news outlet thinks is important for knowing about chips. This is the 11th of June version. This was actually a really fun edition. I would recommend that you jump into this. This is currently priced for power users, people that care about AI. It's $300 a year for a subscription, which is about $1 a day until we get to AGI. There is a pay what you can version for the same editions that is available at LifeArchitect.ai/memo. Here's the article that I was referencing via The Atlantic. It says that China is still 2 generations behind the output of advanced chips. That may be so, but it's not stopping them from training some really incredible models. I'm talking about Qwen2b, talking about SenseNova, which is massive, SenseNova 5.0, and I'm talking about, Ernie 4.0 is old now, but there are some that, E extra large is the other one that is just incredible. Let's type that in here so that it comes across rather than me trying to say that and have it misinterpreted. E large is the one that's been released. They also have E extra large, an MOE model that is in the trillion parameter range. And I believe they've used cloud compute to play around with this. They also have their own chips. As we just noted, they're 2 generations behind, but still it allows them to train things just a little bit slower. Where were we? I got a little bit sidetracked there. Devonshire Hill Lad, I saw that this morning Elon and Tesla said they have 2 Optimus robots working in the factory at Tesla, which is kind of cool. The AGI meter is not based on, it kind of is based on practice as well. Generally, it's based on publications and proof. It doesn't need to be commercialized, so I'll have a closer look at that one and see where we get to. That Sora-like model was called Kling. I think it's by Qai-shou. Kuaishou. It's probably in here somewhere as well. This was a really good edition. They're all really good editions. This one was particularly fun to write. This is Qai-shou's Kling competing with OpenAI's Sora. 30 frames per second, 1080p output, 1920 by 1080 pixels. 2 minutes, just like Sora, but released, available, doing some really fun stuff. trained on Kuaishou's app, almost like Instagram, used by, let's say, hundreds of millions of Chinese citizens. And they've apparently used the video and image data from that to train their text-to-video model. You can ask for a demo at cling.kuaishou.com, and there's a full press release there as well. But that's a real video output, and there are examples of the same prompt being given to Sora and to Kling. Who thought we'd ever be impressed by a man eating noodles, says Thomas. I like the fact that they chose this, particularly after the crazy memes of Will Smith eating spaghetti. Awesome. We've hit our hour mark. I've had a blast talking about OpenELM. I'd love to be able to try it. I reckon we can try it. If you're an Apple developer, you've probably got immediate access to it if there's an early version of iOS 18. The whole concept of trying to squish a model down and have it available for a few billion people is just mind-blowing. Going back to the hypothetical question at the beginning of this video, it's really difficult. It's the same challenge that OpenAI had with ChatGPT. How do we give a model that's going to be served to a few 100 million users? And with all the experience they had in there, including Greg Brockman, who had been the CTO at Stripe, serving hundreds of millions of users for probably billions of transactions per day, still had the challenge of how do we serve something that's not going to explode our servers? And they went with a 20 billion parameter model called GPT 3.5 Turbo, probably quantized down to fit again into a few gig of RAM. Apple have got the vice out and squished it even further down, and it's really incredible, really impressive, similar to what Google will have had to do for Gemma on the Android devices for 3 billion users. I find this as interesting as the massive models, because while the massive models are super powerful and impressive and they can answer my big prompts and they don't mess up, the little ones just allow us to get ready for serving what should be 8 billion people when we make integrated AI ubiquitous and available to everyone. Thanks so much for joining us, particularly those who've joined from unusual time zones. Well, they're usual time zones. They're just not 9 a.m. here in Brisbane. I'm really grateful for having you. You have an open invite to come and join me at the memo, LifeArchitect.ai/memo. There is the full rate you're welcome to pay. There's a pay what you can rate there for developing countries, students, teachers and academics, those with financial challenges. I did not come from wealth, so I'm certainly aware of those that are not able to afford our full rate, but certainly appreciative of those that can. LifeArchitect.ai/memo. See you soon.
Did you see the memo about this?
Yeah, I have the memo right here.
Superintelligence is unfolding at lightning pace. Read my industry-grade analysis of AI that matters as it happens in plain English, the memo.
Yeah. Did you get that memo?
Yeah, I got the memo.
Get the inside look as AI models are embodied into humanoids. AI's IQ increases to nearly perfect, and bleeding-edge use cases expand to the entire world.
Yeah. Didn't you get that memo?
Editions are sent to subscribers at Fortune 500s, major governments, and people like you. LifeArchitect.ai/memo.
I have the memo.